Anurokhi Manasa Susamvato. If you read it properly, meaning वाचा वचनों से वाणी से अनुरक्ति उसकी रक्षा करें, उसको प्रोटेक्ट करें, गार्ड करें। मनसा सुसंवतो, मन से जो संयुक्त है। आयेन च न अकुशलम कहेना, आया से कोई भी कुशल काम न करे। एते तयो स्त्री कम अपत्य विशोदे, सो जो अपने कर्म का रास्ता है, कर्म करते हैं, उनको इन तीन तरह से शुद्ध रखें। तो आराधने मक्कम, इसी को वे जो ऋषि ने जो मार्ग बताया है उसको आराध्य, उसको टेन करना चाहिए, टेन दैट। So the translation would be, one should guard one's speech and restrain one's mind, should not do any evil bodily deed, akushal karma न करें। Purifying in these three ways of action, one should attain the path declared by the saints. Says here refers to the Buddha. So this is the story associated with it. Once, I think we have just mentioned it once earlier also. When Venerable Mahamud Mulana was going on alms round, so he noticed along with another monk, so he noticed a hungry ghost, Preta, head of a pig and one body, and just smiled. So Lakhana asked him why he smiled. And here it says, told him what the Preta had somewhere else, I have read it, he didn't tell him. Then Buddha overheard that and told him that, then he went to Buddha and then he told them, this is what I saw. But here it says Buddha overheard that and then told them that he himself seen that Preta. And then he relates the story of the Preta, that he was a big famous monk who was good in expounding Dhamma. And once he came to a monastery where two friends were staying, and so he kind of created conditions with the place where there was good food, so he could, and their followers liked his way of teaching Dhamma, so he decided to make those two monks go away, make them quarrel and go away, and keep the place for himself. It's obviously a very unwholesome action. He set the two people against each other, and they quarreled and went away. And because of this unwholesome action, he suffered for a very long time. God and Preta and Buddha therefore suggested guard your actions. So the famous monk can also end up in Preta.
योग वे जयति भूरि अयोग भूरि संख्यो एकम द्वेधपथम नत्वा भव्य विभव्य च तथातनम निवेश्य यथा भूरि पावती।
Bhuri here means knowledge or wisdom. So keep it in mind. So keep it clear. Yoga va jayate bhuri. Yoga है meditation. तो योग करने से विजडम जाती है, उत्पन्न होती है। अयोगा, योग न करने से भूरि संख्या, भूरि जो विजडम जो है सब क्षय हो जाता है। एकम, इस तरह से द्वेधा पतन, जो दो रास्ते हैं, ये जो दो रास्ते हैं, इनको न्यात्मा को जानकर भाव है जो धर्म है, जो मतलब एक तो जो है वो आगे ले जाएगा, भावना करेगा, दूसरा जो है वो कर देगा डिक्लाइन का पाथ, एक प्रोग्रेस का पाथ, एक डिक्लाइन का। तथा अत्तानम निवेश है, तो इस तरह से अपने आप को स्टैब्लिश करना चाहिए, इसमें यथा भूमि प्रवर्धति, जिससे विजडम बढ़े, उसका प्रवर्धन। ट्रांसलेशन इन इंग्लिश है, फ्रॉम मेडिटेशन स्प्रिंग्स विजडम and from lack of meditation there is loss of it. So having understood this twofold path of progress and decline, one should conduct oneself in a manner that his wisdom grows. Yeah. Advice. Again, this is about a story about a monk. This occurs in a discourse also, this monk Kotila. He was very good in teaching and knew the Dhamma well from theoretical perspective, but he didn't practice it himself. He was defeated. So to put him on the right path, whenever he would come before Buddha, he called him Tuchaput. So Tuchaputila meant empty. So Kotila reflected on these words and said, why is he telling me this? Then he realized it. Then he went to senior monk and asked them to make his people. They said, we move to another, and eventually he went to a 7-year-old monk who was another. You read it elsewhere, you will recall a 7-year person, boy who became another. So he became his pupil. And then of course he followed the meditation instructions diligently and gave up his conceit, quickly became a enlightened person. Next to the same story.
रुक्षम वनतो जायते भयम छेत्वा वनंच वनथंच निब्बना होथ भिक्खवो.
दूसरे पढ़ दीजिएगा, we are together.
याव हि वनथो न छिज्जति अनुमत्तोपि नरस्य नारिषु पटिबद्ध मनोवतावसो वच्छो क्षीरपकोव मातरी.
So one shabd is two meaning in Pali. One is of course forest, other is lust or the strong desire. So what he is saying, even there is a pun in him. Manam chindatha, pan ko kato, na rukham, ped mat kata. He is saying cut off the forest of passions, not the forest of trees. Basically he is saying don't cut off trees, cut off the forest of passions. Vanato jayate bhayam, from the forest is born fear. Chetva vanancha vanatha, vanatha means पेड़ों के नीचे, वन के नीचे की जो ग्रोथ, क्षेत्रों को काट के जो वन को काट के और वन के नीचे की जो अंडरग्रोथ में तो है डिजायर, तो पैशन को काट के और डिजायर को काट के निब्बाना हो तो दिखाओ, हो attain freedom. You see, nibbana also has come from vana, nirvana, freedom from passions. यावत ही वनथो छिज्जति न छिज्जति, जब तक आप नीचे की जो अंडरग्रोथ है, जो डिजायर है, उसको नहीं काटते. अनुमत्तोपि नरस्य नारिषु, एंड देयर इज इवन अनुमात्र भी अगर पुरुष का स्त्री के प्रति पैशन बन जाता है, पटिबद्धा मनोवतावसो, देन ही इज ट्रैप्ड इन दैट. हाउ? बच्चों खीर पकोवा, जैसे बछड़ा होता है कि माँ के प्रति जिससे वो दूध पीता है उसके साथ चिपका रहता है, उसके साथ अटैच रहता है, इसी तरह से a person will be attached. It is passion for women, but man's passion for women is not cut off. So that is the, so let me translate it in English. Cut off the forest of passions, not the forest of trees. From the forest fear is born, which is forest of passions. Having cut off that forest and undergrowth of desire, who monks attain freedom from passions. As long as the undergrowth of passion of man for woman, however small, is not cut off, so long his mind is bound. As a suckling calf to its mother. The story is about 5 friends who were there in Savatthi, and they all became monks. And they had the habit of, in a very rather old age, not early enough, so they had the habit of going to woods for their alms round. So they used to go to one of the houses where one of the monks' wives was there. So she used to prepare good food. So they would all go to that place and get good food. And as time went by, one day the old lady fell sick and died. And then they all were grieving, praising her virtues, and they were grieving. So Buddha overheard this and then said, using this as an example, gave them these 2 verses to indicate how they were trapped because of passions. This is the two verses.
This is a wonder. Sometimes I notice this. The reference to passion is always unidirectional. It's man's passion for women. ये क्या है ये?
That is the probably the cultural milieu at that time. This woman was obviously subjugated. So it doesn't deny the possibility of women passion. Being a highly male-dominated society at that time, that dimension was because male used to be powerful. There is a tradition of Nagar rule. So a woman who was very beautiful and princes would, all of them would want her. So rather than letting the princes quarrel and kill each other, she would be declared the wife of the Bogdalos. You can see when that tradition existed, so you can see the kind of situation.
What's your own sense of how Buddha approached this thing?
Well, I don't know really for how we approach, but from whatever we have read about the instance of a woman wanting to enter the it's quite very different about it in the beginning. So he refused Ananda when he first made the request because his mother came. She came after all the incidents happened. She decided that she came. So initially he refused and she questioned, are we not capable of becoming a Buddhist? So she questioned Arhan, said, you go and ask these questions. And Anand went and he told Buddha. Next, some other said that Ananda himself posed such questions to him because he felt that they should be admitted and told him. But we were not capable of this, therefore she gave up and she happened to only and then he kind of, series of arguments, he made him say yes. And then as legend has it, he told him, Ananda, you said, if you had not insisted upon women entering the Sangha, the Dhamma would have lasted 1,000 years. Now it can last only 500 years. That's a generally accepted reason. So you could foresee that there will be corruption because of women and men living together. And there will be accusations, there will be problems, because women generally tend to be comparatively weak physically. They can be exploited. It's more vulnerable. And that used to be the situation there. So then in the initial part of Sangha, women also used to go for alms now, stay in the forest alone. Then they got molested. So then he made a rule that women should not go to forest alone and stay in the forest alone. It was not advised for them. Said to be meditate in the monastery or only when senior bhikkhus were there. So these kind of regulations were made because of the vulnerability. So you can understand. Of course you can say he was not a liberal person, if you like, in the modern sense of the term.
And I also noticed जो rules उन्होंने कुछ अलग बनाए थे, including things like a man will always be, I don't know the exact word, but subservient to etc. And if you look at it from a
modern perspective,
it almost seems sexist. And that's why I asked you, how do you read it? Because there might be something more to it than
it looks like that. I can see because I can see that as a method of protecting the women, basically, because there are instances mentioned in that book, Great Disciples of the Buddha, and a woman getting raped and molested, things of that kind. And therefore, to protect them, he made that regulation. No, that Don't take yourself equal to them and then do whatever they are doing and repeating whatever they are doing, because then you'll get into trouble. So, even for going for alms round, for everything, you are supposed to be accompanied by people because of this. And I presume because of this. One can interpret it as a kind of shamanistic perspective. I don't know. I hold no difference of infections, but the way I can understand it. It seems so, that of course we know that. In modern times we tend to think them as equal, which is, in a sense it is true, in the body it is not true. There is a problem physically. So, he didn't have to show himself to be what should I say, liberal, and there was no such, he didn't have any such compulsion. He had only compassion. Out of compassion, I think he made these rules. They should be well protected. They needed protection. Man didn't need protection. That's how I feel. There were stories of Arhant nuns getting raped by their former lovers, because they had, before coming to monastery, or really coming before, they had some boyfriend or whatever you will call it. Out of passion he came and the Arhant nun told him, don't do such thing, don't do such thing, you will be in deep trouble. But he couldn't restrain. And soon after that, he just died. So many such instances. So, looking at that, I mean, all the rules, if you see, they were made in that manner only. In the beginning of Sangha, when everybody was Arhant, there was no rule. There were 5 people, they became Arhant, and another 100, they became Arhant. And that's how the initial phase of Sangha was. But later, as it became too big, then lesser competent people and somewhere insincere people also joined the thing. That's how schisms took place and fights took place, all kinds of things happened. So keeping in view that, I think that must have been the basis for such what to be termed as sexist. This has been a contention among feminists. Even this refusal to ordain Mahaprajapati is seen not in a good light in modern feminists. And the regulations are also seen like that. That's your perspective.
Interestingly, in Jainism, I think somebody even says that a woman cannot become an Arhant. That's been that's what I've read.
No, Ananda asks him, this first question which he asked, what was this? Can a woman not become an Arhant? Why not? And then he knows that he has got trapped. And he weaves around on that statement that, so if you don't teach, then how would you become? And she is your mother and she has settled you and this and that and your gratitude. And he says, okay. And you can't say, my mother is the only one who can be ordained. The door is open. That's why Ananda is seen as a kind of patron saint of nuns. He is the person who got the permission of the Buddha.
It's very interesting that Anand didn't become an Arhant while Buddha was alive. It seems there is some deeper meaning to it.
Because it's not just the association with Buddha that you become Arhant. Right. It's only by practice. Intense practice.
And these arguments are being made through Anand. Such arguments.
Yeah, because he had a role to play.
Right. And probably if he would have been Arhant, probably he wouldn't have made this argument. Maybe.
Yeah. Because he was a cousin,
Right.
He had that filial affection for him. He was a younger cousin of his, and first cousin. So he had an affection. So he not only had reverence, he also had affection, and he also felt some kind of a, there is that story that when his actually first attendant was somebody else, maid or some other person, who was not so careful. So once that person said that I want to go to that place and meditate, don't go there. Buddha told him, mango grove, we don't go there. 3 times he said, okay, go. Went there and his mind got absolutely haywire, and that because there were people who were dancing and things were going on. And then he came back, and then his kind of attentiveness drastically reduced. And then as Buddha became older, he said, I need a better thing. So the story goes that he wanted Ananda to be, he was looking at Ananda that he was younger to him, that he should become a different. And Ananda didn't agree, said nothing to him. You have these conditions, then you will. I mean, nobody would have dared to put conditions on Buddha. He dared, these are no conditions. Then he agreed to them. So obviously there was something, relationships were different. So then we can't really figure it out. In our purely modern development discourse. The discourse now is, and this discourse has taken a different shape also.
Sir, we should talk about it. Because if we don't, I mean, what is happening is we are based on our current understanding not spiritual but worldly, cultural understanding. We have certain criteria, certain test cases that what is good and what is not. And we have reverence for Buddha, so we want to apply these criteria on him and want to make sure that he passes them. Because,
well said.
Yes, and then we say if he doesn't pass them, then there is a problem. Then I have conflict inside me. But what we have to understand really is that if we have these criteria fixed and through which only we see Buddha, then we are missing the total point. Because these have not come from any level of understanding. These have been accepted arguments based on current discourse, feminist or otherwise, or leftist or whatever discourse you want, rightist, doesn't matter which ist. So it's funny that at all points of time I feel all of these great people, their disciples or their followers or some people who understood them, reinterpreted their teachings in order to be okay with the norms of that time to some extent. And so
it is happening
even to Buddha.
It's happening. We have that secular
Buddhism,
Buddhism, bachelor and all.
Don't talk about karma and rebirth.
Very popular. In fact, only yesterday, I mean, surprisingly, I had, I mean, in the Facebook I get mail from one person, I don't know, I don't know his name, Nitya. Yeah, he's known to me from childhood. My son's last name, I know him very well. So he is a monk for 6 years, and then he is at his food and does a good, very good. He is a very good countenance and very good samadhi and ability to communicate and all that. So there were very good mails from him. I keep on feeling good about it. Yesterday there was a mail of this kind, in a modern sense of trying to see things in a different perspective, in the modern perspective, that love of sex, love of money, people have been too much guilty of a guilt complex about it. We keep it up. It's quite natural, and we don't need to really have any taboos and kind of things like that. Now obviously such a statement would endear you to young people. And you will have kind of people saying, yes, this is what, and that the teachings of the Buddha essentially imply that you should accept whatever it is, and therefore whatever it is should be accepted. And why should there be repressions, and why should there be restraints, and things like that. So you can see how acceptance of what is can be just a slight twist and you're in abyss. So I try to send a number of mails to some responses in order to caution him about it, because he took it nicely, but finally he couldn't really, he didn't accept. He had made some remark about monks thinking that they are superior because of celibacy and not having money, and we have a feeling that they are superior. It's all wrong, there's nothing like that. We're all one, we are all equal, we are all this. But see that what a grave danger in it. He's a young person, he's 35. He just married. He can get into huge trouble. There's so many teachers have got into trouble at that time. When you have a very pleasing and charming personality, and you have a large number of female students, you can get into deep trouble. You can take oneness literally. But if you're not cautious, then you get the kind of things. I mean, such a great teacher like Chongjin Trungpa got into this trouble. He's supposed to be an enlightened person, actually. Tremendous personality, great ability to teach and great presence. People used to say that those who would sit near him would really feel his presence and get
People
calmed
say
down.
about Rajni Rose.
Yeah, same thing about Rajni. You just sit near him and you will feel the aura and the calmness around him. And just this slight, I would say, slippage, and you are entering into abyss. Disordered, married, alcohol, smoke, cigarette, sex, got AIDS, and gave AIDS to so many of his students. People have made a film on him of Devi Wisdom. Chongjin Trungpa. He died at the age of 48 because of the illnesses which he had. So if you are not careful, you can interpret emptiness, you can interpret not self in a disastrous manner. There is no self, what is happening, right? But I am not doing anything. What I can do? So that is the problem, when you apply modern perspectives and when you don't see the part of the teaching in a proper way, you can get into great trouble. So I am always reminded of this issue. We have discussed this issue so much. What about the anatta, and what about all other 7 parts of it? What about the Eightfold Path and what about anatta? They seem to conflict. Eightfold Path says samma vacha, samma kammanto, samma ajivo. What is all this samma? Why is this needed? When everything is, whatever is there, you accept it. If you get into that kind of a complication and that kind of a mindset, which is a slight deviation in the theoretical sense, but it can lead you to disaster. And you can say, no, what is there? And later he realized that what his statement, his students have said, Chongjin Trungpa, I thought I have overcome materiality. So one has to see the teaching in its totality. And that's the greatness of Dalai Lama. People ask him, why don't you teach emptiness to everybody? It's dangerous. Teach compassion, that is safe. Because emptiness essentially means not self. And if you take that not self, if you are not mature enough to accept that teaching, you will interpret it in a disastrous manner. I am not the doer, I am not doing anything. Whatever I do is not done by me. It ends. There is a prerequisite of strong moral restraint, strong moral abilities, ethical and moral abilities, ability to restrain the mind. If that is not there, and you let you kind of theoretically understand the teaching of emptiness or shunyata or non-self, and or even oneness, everybody is one.
So, sir, in today's time, it is very important that we have to look at the modern discourse and say what is in conflict with Buddha's teaching or ancient teaching. For example, the word moral is a dirty word now. You can't utter the word moral and get away with it in a politically correct television debate or newspaper
You
debate.
say musical debate, in that Facebook debate,
You can't.
where all his students are there, meditative students are there,
Right.
they all pounced upon my comments. And
Right.
you should accept whatever it is, the restraints of stupidity, this is that, that is that. Of course, he was very reverential because of his nice person, he said, I look into it. But finally I gave this example. I said, this is my last word to you. Please be careful. I'm not talking of an ideology, I'm not talking of any damn thing. It's just pure caution. And because I love you, I just come and give you that advice. Be careful. And I even wrote down these names. So there's great masters like Osho and Chongun Trungpa and have come to grief and brought thousands of students to grief. Because we can slip very easily. In the modern discourse of equality and oneness, in fact one person had, one lady had mentioned, even the female and male body is meant to, has been constructed like this, so we should have freedom to and get the oneness which comes by complementing this body, physical body. You can see to what extent you can take it. Then oneness means oneness with everybody. So you experience oneness, actually you should experience, not just theoretically understand. So you go ahead and experience it. So the modern discourse, when you try to fit in and chip off teachings, at one level you chip off the morality, other level you chip off dharma, another level you chip off anatta. Each of them are equally deficient. But chipping off anatta is probably less serious than other things. If you chip off morality, it's disaster in making.
The other problem that happens, and most people are unsuspecting when they hear such things. When somebody says everybody is equal, everybody should, which sounds brilliant. How can you deny such a statement? Or when you say something like everybody should have the same rights, how can you deny such a statement? Everybody should get justice. How can you deny such a statement? You can't. So is there a theoretical, somebody who has deep understanding may see through these statements. But if you don't have that understanding, then at a theoretical level, when something like Buddhism or any tradition talks to a modern person, there is a conversation, how do you see through the falsity of such statements? It is extremely important that we do that. Because
if you try to make any statements which are not in accordance with the modern discourse, you'll be threatened.
Yes.
Actually, your
Yes.
existence will be threatened.
But there are logical ways to do that.
Yeah. But nobody is willing to listen
Right,
to it.
nobody is willing to listen. For example, if I attempt to do it with one sentence, this need to be seen as correct, to be seen as politically correct, comes from setting up ideals. It's like, it's an ideal thing. Everybody should be equal. Everybody should have the same rights, etc. Are ideal things, right? So, if today you mention something which is against an ideal, you are seen as somebody who doesn't believe in that ideal, and hence you are some narrow-minded bigot or whatever it is. The problem is, by putting up ideals which are not aligned with reality as it exists, you are actually causing problems. So the whole, actually we shouldn't go to this direction, but last 100 years or even more than that, since modernity emerged, this has been the cause of
all problems. Big wars have been fought on ideals. Big revolutions, so-called revolutions, have been conducted on these ideals. And we try to bring about change in the real world based on what is ideal. Whereas Buddha's teachings or anybody, they would not say, see, having arahantship as an ideal is a personal ideal, is completely different from saying everybody is equal. So Buddha will say, where are you and what is your next step? For you the next step is rumal utha karke puncho, that is next step. To somebody the next step is just teaching of anatta and he is liberated. It's not setting up an ideal but giving the next step. Whereas what we are doing in the modern discourse is we have these statements which sound just, and in order to hold on to them intellectually in a debate, we are not realizing that just saying these statements will not bring about transformation of the mind or changes which will lead us to the realization of those ideals. All this sound very, but unfortunately that is happening.
Did we read Abhay Rajkumar Sutta? That is quite relevant in this discussion. It's good that we discuss. There's no hurry for us to do something. There's a discourse there that the followers of Nigantha have a disciple, Prince Abhay. So he goes to them and then Nigantha tells them that you go to Buddha and ask him this two-horned question. And then you will not be able to answer it, and then your reputation will spread that you have defeated Buddha in a dialogue and discussion. So what is the question? So then he goes and you ask this question about Devadatta. So then it goes, I have not tell the question here and later. So he says you asked him, the question was, what he had said, they suggested, you asked him that whether a Buddha would make any such statement which would hurt anybody. So if he says yes, then obviously you tell him what is the difference between you and others. If he says no, then tell him, then why did you make a statement that Devadatta is destined to go to hell? He is feeling very hurt, so he will be caught. So Rajkumara said, okay, I'll go. As the teacher is telling, he goes, he says, okay, I'll go and ask him this question and see. Then he goes there to the Buddha, but it's evening and so he says it's not the right time. So he invites him for lunch at his home. And after the lunch next day, he asks this question. So he says, would an enlightened being say anything which will hurt a person? He says, there is no clear answer to this question. There is no yes and no answer to this question. He says, why? And then there is that issue of how does the enlightened one speak? Speaks things which are true, not untrue. He never would speak untrue. He would speak things which are beneficial, not which are not beneficial. Even if they are true and unbeneficial, he will not speak. He will speak things which are pleasant and also things which are unpleasant if they are beneficial. So this is his right. Then he gives the example that the prince had a child in his lap. He says, suppose this child swallows this pebble, it stuck in his throat and he's gasping. What would you do? He says, I would put my fingers and take it out. And even if it means that blood comes out of this boy's throat, I cannot avoid it because he'll die otherwise. So I take it out. He says, why are you doing it? He'll be getting hurt, he'll get blood in his throat. I do it out of compassion, otherwise he'll die. So exactly the same way, I do it out of compassion. If I had to tell a harsh thing, I do that. Obviously the prince is stronger. Then he says, oh, Niganthas are lost on it. Then he asks him, how are we? Then he tells him the whole story. So you can see this. So the issue of the way we respond to situations. You can try to be trapped in a situation, and if you put it with the ideal of you should speak the truth and not speak the truth, even there, you have a judgment whether it is worth speaking or not. He's making such a fine distinction there. One can say he is effectively saying that truth should not be spoken. Isn't it?
Almost sounds strategy. Yeah.
It sounds like a strategy. The truth should be spoken only when it is beneficial. Now, who is going to if you tell it in manner, अच्छा तो फिर तो relative हो गया ना, but you can interpret it in that manner. So this teaching has been interpreted in such a virulent manner. Well, fine, then everything is relative. Really, everything is relative. It depends on what I think is beneficial. Because you are not able to see the difference between Buddha and yourself. He has compassion, he has insight, he can see through you.
And sir, one thing that will benefit most the whole modern situation is that everybody who talks of rights, there are so many people talking of rights, human rights, this person's right, that person's right, minority rights, women rights. Now people talk of majority rights because oppositely minority, etc. etc. Instead of that, they should talk about compassion. Compassion for everybody. When you talk of rights, you don't think of the whole system. You think of one component and you अब झंडा लगे खड़े हो जाते हैं. But you talk of compassion, you say, how will rights of this person affect the whole system? Not to deny the rights. What to do in order so that the whole system, compassion for this. But it is, we don't have discourse like that.
You will never find in Buddha's discourses this issue mentioned of rights or duties. Duties are still mentioned.
Only
Duties of lay people, duties of a son towards his father, duty of mother towards his son, and I mean both kinds of things are mentioned. What are the duties of son towards the father? Duties of father towards son. That is mentioned in discourses. There is no issue of rights. The only inheritance you have is your own karma. That's it. So the whole paradigm is different. The whole way of thinking is different. So this framework, which we have, modern framework of the prime sections of society, and famous women and child care and this and that, as is rightly put, they all come under one single rubric of compassion.
but they sound very compassionate towards the group there whose cause they are espousing.
Yeah,
That is the unfortunate, that it's,
that's right.
yeah, the truth is getting lost in that.
No, because we don't see that compassion has to be universal, otherwise it becomes passion. It's no longer compassion. If it is, it's like love, you know. If love is universal, there is no issue. If it is confined to a narrow segment, it immediately becomes into passion, and then there is a segment with which the love will be in conflict. You will be hating somebody else. All our attempts to give special rights to deprived people have resulted in conflict in the society. Even such a simple thing as reservations for SC/ST has created conflict in the society.
So sir, the counter question that is asked is then, how do we solve the problem? Because there is a problem.
Problem solution is if people can see the totality. There should be, the policy framework has to be done and implemented by people who are really enlightened. There is no other solution less than that. You may say it is impossible. Fine, that's what it is impossible to have peace in the society. No doubt about it. So when Plato said that philosopher should be king, that was a great thinker, there is no doubt about it. And he had the temerity to write a dialogue like Republic and vehemently criticize democracy. He was living in a democracy, Athens was a democracy. And he, of course, and here is the example of his teacher getting killed, getting going to inquisition for his thoughts, for spoiling the minds of the people. So Plato could also as well have met the same fate, because he fled away. He fled Athens then after the death of Socrates. He might have thought, maybe a bari aa jayegi. So the clarity of thinking, or that equality has to be seen in its right perspective. He says The greatest inequality is when we make unequal equal. Greatest injustice. The greatest injustice in the society is when unequals are made equal. And he goes on to use that as a touchstone for critique of democracy. When you give same right, same vote to everybody, a person who is a drunkard and a person who is a debauched character and a person who is a bully person, person who is a wild person, a person who is a mad person, they have the same right to choose. Then obviously the democracy will end up in choosing demagogues, only those who can have a good speech and ability to hoodwink people, they get elected. And then it will be full of thieves and robbers. Use such kind of words. And people who are muscle men, they will be able to vote our young use weaker people and get the votes. And you find if you read it, you will see कि वो भारतवर्ष में पक्का हो रहा है.
This whole vote bank story, everybody is a vote bank.
I mean, it's really amazing that what he wrote 2000 years ago is being actually lived here today.
So this,
But it's so difficult. अब आज किसी को कह दो हर आदमी का वोट अलग होना चाहिए, गर्दन काट दी जाएगी आपको.
so मैं एग्जांपल देना चाहता हूँ, मैं पढ़ा था मैंने कि वो एजुकेशन सिस्टम इन इंडिया प्री ब्रिटिश, if an Indian says something about it, nobody believes it. So people have tried to figure out what Britishers wrote about Indian system before they changed it. So one very famous quotation says that this was about Bombay, Panvel area or some such area, but this is found in many other places also. That the school was run by, so villagers used to run schools, and almost, I mean, every village had at least one school, and the person deputed as the teacher would be paid very not much, and the payment was based on the capability of the person who was paying. For the same teaching, the poor will pay less and the rich will pay more, without the rich saying, why am I paying more? This is not equality, but this is justice. And today when we say in the discourse equality is not justice, we mean something else. I mean, justice is not, I mean, sorry, I will not go there, but so this example was given according to his own capability. And then I have heard of this this from a person who used to see this when he was old, I mean when he was a child, he is old now, that on Dashera or some such day, the teacher would go to every parent's house and the parent would have reverence for the teacher because it is his son's or daughter's teacher, and would ask कि आपके यहाँ पर इस साल कुछ है? If he says मेरी बेटी की शादी करनी है, so then all of those whose children are being taught by the teacher will take up the responsibility of getting his daughter married. So there is reverence in that direction, and the teacher is teaching. So it was a system which is sort of very different. Now what we will say is it's unfair that the fees is like this. Now what we will do, we will have special, we will say, take this part of the society, 25% students, and they would not have something like this, and then there will be conflict. But how do you create a system where the rich says I will pay more and the poor says I will pay less and the teacher says fine?
वो गरीबी के कारण नहीं करते थे, वो करते थे कि सारा शादी गांव की होती थी, इंडिविजुअल की नहीं होती. वो की बात आने समाने का जो जहाँ पे ग्राम स्वराज की अथवा धारणा थी, इट इज बेस्ड ऑन दोस काइंड ऑफ थिंग्स. हम लोग जो अंगिरी प्रोजेक्ट कर रहे थे तो एक सज्जन थे रविंद्र शर्मा,
मैं मिला हूँ उनसे,
आदिलाबाद के.
हाँ, मैं उन्हीं की कहानी बता रहा हूँ जो ये उन्होंने
सच्चे deep insight into the past.
मैं इनको मिलाने ले गया था एक दिन उनको.
अच्छा, we have had long chats with him in वर्धा में, हमको बुलाते थे, discussions with him about the past arts and craft.
He was a craftsman. He is a craftsman.
He mentions about the how the whole society was integrated in a manner that every person would be given duty, which is anathema in modern times. It's totally against our modern kind of modernism. वो इसको समझ ही नहीं आ रहा. You think of it as archaic and obsolete and unfair and unjust and पता नहीं क्या क्या कहोगे.
medieval.
कुछ भी कह देते हैं.
That's the गाली है. आजकल medieval कहना बहुत बड़ी गाली है फिर.
चलिए, we spend a whole time in this.
Oh my God.
Alright. You have no agenda. You have no compulsion to finish.
इसको
You are present करना है. You are present करना.
फिर उसका लॉक हो गया.
Off में कैसा वो
लैपटॉप.
laptop. तो आप इससे
नहीं लॉगिन कर रहे हैं.
So you are discussing which chapter?
Fourth chapter role playing.
Comment परेशान हो गए हैं कहा क्या बोल रहे हैं.
फिर ये डिस्कशन ज़्यादा वो
What are you discussing? What happened to your third turn?
So Silesh is saying, Mara, I see you is hard even for monks, looks like. And then also, what was the name of the sutta? Abhay Raja Kumar Sutta.
You have not studied it? That Rajkumar?
Yes sir, he's read it. And now I remember. मुझे शुरू का नहीं पता था. But I remember these three things, you know, when should you speak and whether it is true or not.
I don't remember this Pebble story.
Pebble story नहीं मुझे याद है. मुझे ये तीन स्टेज का फ्रेमवर्क है ना ये याद है.
ये हमने हो सकता है. वैसे कई बार डिस्कस किया है. सुत्ता
अच्छा तो शायद
भी मैंने
ये वैसे डिस्कस किया होगा.
Very interesting. Yes, sir. Deepak.
So I'll just give a quick recap. So we were studying fourth chapter, which is role playing. We started with role playing and we found three common roles people play as a villain, victim, and lover. And the common example of villain is children, who commonly act as villain to get an attention. And role playing in victim happens when victim seeks sympathy or pity by playing this role. And in the example of lover role playing happens in early stages of romantic relationships. And then we talked about various roles which happen, and one common way was when the civilization happened, role playing came as starting with the class system, where we define a ruler, priest, warrior and farmer. And then in modern society we have these organizations like church or corporations or military where role playing happens. And also the author mentions that other role playing happens as stereotype roles like housewife or a macho male or an artist, which are defined as a role and then people identify with them. And then there are different temporary roles which we play, like when we speak to a chairman of a company, we'll speak in a particular manner, and when we speak to a janitor, we'll speak in some other manner. So these were temporary role playings. And the author says that recognition of one playing a role creates a space and allows the freedom to come in where you can stop. You don't really identify with the role. You just create a space between you and the role which you are playing. And then this author defines the true happiness as something that happiness is ever elusive, but the freedom from unhappiness is attainable now by facing what is rather than making up stories about it. And in the last we talked about parenting as a role playing, that are you treating your child as equal or are you taking the role of parent seriously and guiding the child as this not guiding, just seeing the child as like do this or do that, rather than he being a more human, child as a human being or equal to you. So these are the things we studied in the last session, and so the next section is conscious suffering, and the author in conscious suffering wants to bring to this notice that as your child grows and likely as it becomes adult, allow your child to explore the world, and while the child explores the world, he will make mistakes. Then allow him to make mistakes and allow him to suffer on those mistakes, rather than trying to protect the child at every stage and not allow him to explore the world. And he says that but through, I'll just read that, they would not evolve as human beings as would and would remain shallow, identified with external form of things. Suffering drives you deeper. So that's the message is there as a parent when you should allow your child to explore the world.
There's a caveat here also. Very serious caveat. ये तो दिक्कत है ना. When you say that you should allow them to suffer and make mistakes, it is pretty fine. But there are some mistakes which are only made once. So one has to be careful. See, the same problem of idealization and equality. Same problem. The child has to take a drug once. He doesn't need to take it more. Finished. Child has to touch a 220 volt socket once. He does not need to touch it again.
So there was a person.
One has to see that. These caveats have to be seen here.
So, but other than the experiences of this, there is security, whether it's short term or the long term security. For example, drugs, your security is gone because yourself will not be able to come out of it. Whatever willpower you do, and it is basically lesser severe, but it's as close to putting your finger in the 220 volt socket. But other than physical security issues, are there other things that we should be? See, because morality falls in that. So how would you teach a child that
the issue is of teaching child morality in a didactic manner or teaching it in an experiential manner. Let him do experiments and telling a lie. No problem. With you. There's no issue. Let him do that and see. And you do it with him and see how he feels. That's the way you can teach. If a child has that temperament. Not all children have that temperament. Many children are naturally telling truth. They don't want to. They learn from us how to tell a lie. But in those matters you can always. Now in sexual misconduct, if you don't advise the child properly, especially at the teenager age, you get into serious problems. Serious problems. So you are forced to do something. Somewhere you have to advise with all its implications. Obviously you can't go to the child's hostel and see what he is doing. That's his club. You still want to suffer, then you will suffer. And then as a parent you will still look after him. Definitely. But it's the duty to advise. You can't just let the child explore everything. There are so many things where advice would be needed. But the advice has to be given in a very tactful manner. To tell about what are the consequences of not following the basic ethics and morality. And then leave it to everyone to do. It now depends on our ability to teach, our ability to convey that. I don't know, your class or some other class, I remember we had discussions on this issue of sexual misconduct. So, आज क्या है हमारे 3-4 गर्लफ्रेंड है क्या है? कोई बात नहीं, भाई कल शादी हो जाएगी, तो उनको लगेगा कि हाँ शादी हो जाए तो we can have, what is the problem in having affairs? have a wife, that's okay. But you feel attracted to somebody in office that at place, what is the difficulty? Why are you saying that it is a misconduct? It's okay. So wife also does it, then it is okay with you. So nothing okay. Why are you feeling bad? Just as you can have affairs, she can also have affairs.
But many people may say yes to that. Americans say yes to that also now.
Yeah, that's okay. Fortunately, that didn't come. Otherwise, I would change my argument.
They have other problems.
No, but I'm saying Americans may say, okay, I'm fine, you are fine, let's go.
Yeah, that's okay. Then you have to find out some other way of a dialogue for them. You have to learn. You have to learn how to teach yourself.
Actually, if you are isolated from the world and you are doing your own thing and you are not troubling anybody, it's fine. But it doesn't work that way.
We are not isolated. So some things are quite important which have to be impressed upon strongly. Even, of course, you can't prevent it. A teenager going to a hospital, you cannot prevent him from doing anything. You know, but you can't say that you should therefore not tell him to do हंस मत देना, शराब मत पीना, गलत काम मत करना, अभी फंसना नहीं किसी चीज चक्करों में, आपको वो कहना ही नहीं चाहिए. तो दिस इज अमेरिकन कल्चर. वहाँ पे स्कूलों में लिखा रहता है कि तुम्हारे माता पिता तुमको कुछ परेशान तो नहीं कर रहे. Okay, school thing like that.
सर वो तो 911 फोन कर रहे थे. ये फेमस कहानी है कि एक बूढ़ी आई है.
Where is the conscious parenting? There is no issue of conscious parenting at all. There is no parenting actually. It's freedom. So everybody is free to do whatever he likes. So we have to see the limitations of everything.
बट सर अब तो ये सब सिखाना पड़ रहा है. पहले के लोगों को सब पता था संभव.
नहीं.
ऐसा लगता है कि हाँ बट अलग तरीके की तब दूसरी डायरेक्शन में ज्यादा थी.
प्रॉब्लम तो
होती है.
25 के लिए तो हो गया.
हमेशा ही रहेंगी.
तब भी नहीं. We discussed just now. There were courtesans. चलता ही रहता है. Which in modern times would be seen as a absolute disaster. How can you do that? But that we accepted as a method of preventing princes from fighting in a war between.
But I keep thinking of
Surprising.
writing something. I mean, I can't write, but I'm thinking about आजकल जो हो रहा है, imagining a world where this whatever is happening today will be seen as absolutely wrong. I think the right things that we think today are seen as absolutely wrong. It's a thought experiment worth doing. आज जो हमने सोसाइटी ने नॉर्म की तरह एक्सेप्ट कर लिया है, उसको एक्सेप्ट करने की देखनी चाहिए कोशिश.
So the next section is conscious parenting, and author here makes the difference between giving a child form-based attention or form-based attention. And form-based attention is that statements like have you done your homework, eat your dinner. It's always about evaluation. We're trying to make about trying to evaluate the child or ask him to do something. And then formless attention is that when you listen to your child, touch your child, help your child, and be completely present with your child. And there is no asking there. It's just I'll just read. In that moment, if you are present, you are not a father or a mother. You are the alertness, the stillness, the presence that is listening, looking, touching, even speaking. You are the being behind the doing. So this is the distinction that is being made between.
Okay, sir, this is true for not only parenting, everywhere. In office, I see this all the
Every
time.
action. Every direction which can be.
And the next section is giving up role playing. And here the author says that do whatever is required for you in any situation without becoming a role that you identify with. And when you don't play roles, your actions have far greater power. You are totally focused on situation and you become one with it. Okay. And the next section is
So the real problem, I think we omitted that, like the last paragraph. The real problem in our interactions is that we are concerned about how others are going to think about us. That is the real problem.
yes.
We are concerned about how others will define us in our actions. मैं ऐसे कर रहा हूँ कुछ तो कुछ हो जाएगा, सही हो जाएगा, सही तो नहीं होगा, सही तो नहीं होगा. Because the actions are not coming out of compassion, and there is that ego issue involved. But of course, in a matter of practice, it has to be very refined, but being aware of it is very important.
So acting in a situation based on the merit of the situation that's up
Versus how is it going to affect my image in the life of the others.
And so this is all exactly the same as the not self.
Yeah, we should basic. All these will become possible only when we are seen through that illusion. Otherwise, as a meditation teacher, we always used to be worried that मैं ऐसा कर रहा हूँ कि उसको गलत मतलब तो नहीं लग जाएगा. If I do this and the students को गलत impression तो नहीं पड़ जाएगा. So you are always in a state of evaluation. While we teach non-judgmental observation, you yourself constantly evaluating because you build an image of yourself as a person who is a meditation teacher or a teacher or something whose image should not be spoiled. So it can act in the beginning as a restraining influence, which is good, but it can become a factor eventually. In the beginning of your journey, such restraints, such self-evaluation are helpful. They prevent us from being rude, being immoral, to make us ensure that we remain within ethical boundaries, we don't transgress them. But once your ethics and morality is really entrenched, you know for sure it's not going to break these moral precepts in any way, then everything else then becomes a pattern. Till such time as there is a threat of breaking the morality, then of course you should self-evaluate something. So everything has its pros and cons. Actually, this is what I have found for myself and for many of my friends.
So I find some people who are not necessarily who understand all this are also very present in the moment, not playing role. It comes naturally to some people.
So we'll stop.
जल्दी भी निकल रहे हैं.
We'll stop.
Kids time करते हैं.
उनको भी जाना, मैडम को भी जाना है, तो माता जी हॉस्पिटल में बीमार है तो 10 days. She has to go just now than I go. तो वहाँ पे भी जितना हॉस्पिटल में कल रोड ब्लैंक करनी पड़ी, काफी गांड दर्द करनी पड़ी. माता जी का वो पेसमेकर लगा हुआ है तो काम नहीं कर रहा है. She is really hanging. Heart is malfunctioning. उस टाइम से चक्कर आया था. She fell in home basically और चोट लग गई. All that story is there. They diagnose it that it is the reason. पेसमेकर की लीड खराब है. But आज उस डायग्नोसिस को 5 दिन हो गए. They have not taken the appropriate action. We kept patient. We said, okay, we'll do the operation. It needs a minor surgery. In her case, it is a major issue because she has to be given general anesthesia at that age.